I'm quitting my job tomorrow, Grandma. You'll take care of me while I figure things out. I stared at the text message from my granddaughter Chelsea, my coffee cup frozen halfway to my lips as the audacity of her words sank in. 8 months of temporary had just become permanent servitude at the whim of a 26-year-old who'd never heard the word no in her privileged life. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me backtrack and tell you how I became the free hotel for my cheating granddaughter. It started innocently enough, as these things always do. Chelsea had married her college sweetheart Marcus and moved to Portland, about an hour from my little town of Millbrook. For 2 years, everything seemed perfect. She posted those annoying couple photos on Facebook, you know the type, both of them grinning at fancy restaurants with captions about living their best life. Then one Wednesday evening last March, my doorbell rang at 11:47 p.m. I knew the exact time because I'd been watching the late news when that urgent, desperate knocking started. Through the peephole, I saw Chelsea standing on my porch with 2 suitcases and mascara streaking down her cheeks like war paint. "Grandma Betty, please," she sobbed the moment I opened the door. "Marcus found out about everything. He threw me out. I have nowhere else to go." Everything. That was an interesting word choice, wasn't it? Not Marcus found out I cheated or I made a mistake. No, Chelsea said everything like she was the victim of some cosmic misunderstanding rather than a grown woman who'd been caught red-handed with her personal trainer. I wrapped my granddaughter in my arms because that's what grandmothers do, even when we suspect we're being played. "It's okay, sweetheart. You can stay here as long as you need." Famous last words, as it turned out. "Just temporarily," she assured me between sobs. "Maybe a month, just until I figure things out." That was 8 months ago. 8 months of Chelsea treating my home like a luxury resort where the amenities included free meals, housekeeping, and a grandmother who apparently existed solely to fund her healing journey. But this morning's text message had pushed me past my breaking point into territory I hadn't visited since I was raising my own children. I set down my coffee and read the message again, just to make sure I hadn't hallucinated the sheer nerve of it. Nope, there it was in black and white. "I'm quitting my job tomorrow." Not, "Grandma, I'm struggling and wonder if we could discuss my options." Not, "I'm grateful for everything you've done." Just a simple announcement that she'd decided to quit her perfectly good job at the marketing firm and expected me to pick up the tab indefinitely. Well, wasn't that precious? That's when I realized I'd been looking at this situation all wrong. I'd been thinking like a grandmother when I should have been thinking like the woman who'd raised 3 kids on a secretary's salary after my husband died at 42. The woman who'd worked 2 jobs to put those kids through college. The woman who'd somehow forgotten that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. It's enabling. Chelsea had been working remotely since moving in, which I'd initially appreciated. It meant she was contributing something, even if her contribution to household expenses had been exactly $0.00. But working from my guest room apparently wasn't glamorous enough for someone who'd grown accustomed to thinking the world owed her a living. I picked up my phone and called my neighbor Margaret, who'd been watching this circus unfold from her kitchen window for the better part of a year. "Margaret, it's Betty. Are you busy this morning?" "Never too busy for you, hun. What's going on?" "I need to run some errands, and I was wondering if you could keep an eye on the house. Chelsea's upstairs, probably planning her next career move, which apparently involves being professionally unemployed." Margaret chuckled. "That girl's really something, isn't she? Bill saw her having lunch at that expensive bistro downtown yesterday. Said she was dressed like she was going to a job interview at Vogue." Interesting. Chelsea had told me she was home all day working on a big project. Either she was moonlighting as a fashion model, or my granddaughter had been lying to me. Again. "Margaret, can I ask you something? In your honest opinion, do you think I'm being a pushover?" The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to question whether the call had dropped. "Betty," Margaret finally said, "you're the kindest woman I know. But that girl has been taking advantage of your generosity since the day she moved in. Last week, I saw her having groceries delivered while you were at the store buying food for dinner. She's ordering takeout while you're cooking meals she doesn't even bother to eat." My stomach clenched because every word Margaret said was true. Chelsea had her own routine that existed parallel to mine, like we were roommates who'd never actually agreed to the arrangement. She slept until 10, worked sporadically, took long lunch breaks, and treated my home like her personal retreat center. "I think," Margaret continued gently, "it might be time for some tough love." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen and really looked at my life for the first time in months. My grocery bills had doubled. My utility bills had increased by 40%. My quiet, peaceful retirement had become a constant stress fest of walking on eggshells around someone who acted like I should be grateful for her presence. But the text message this morning had clarified something important. Chelsea wasn't planning to leave. She wasn't figuring figuring anything out. She was settling in for a permanent vacation, funded by her grandmother's Social Security and retirement savings. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to my friend Dorothy, who worked at the employment office downtown. Dorothy, I need a favor. I need to know what kinds of jobs are available for someone with marketing experience. Planning a career change at 73, Betty? Dorothy laughed. Not for me, for my granddaughter. The one who's been living with me. Oh, the pretty blonde? Funny thing about her, she came in here about 3 months ago, said she'd been laid off from her job and filed for benefits. But then last month, my friend Helen, who works at that marketing firm downtown, mentioned they were having trouble with an employee who kept calling in sick. Same girl, same name. Seems like she was working while collecting unemployment. The ground shifted under my feet. Chelsea had filed for unemployment benefits while still employed, told me she was working full-time, and somehow managed to keep collecting benefits even after getting a new position. Dorothy, that's fraud, isn't it? Sure is, hun. Big time. My second call was to my lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia who'd handled my husband's estate years ago. Patricia, I need to ask about something. If someone is living in my house and receiving mail here, does that establish any kind of legal tenancy? Betty, what's going on? I explained the situation in broad strokes. Patricia listened without interrupting, which is why I'd always liked her. In Oregon, she said finally, someone who's lived in a property for more than 30 days with the owner's permission is considered a tenant, even without a lease. But given that this is family and there's no written agreement, you have option. The key is documentation and following proper procedures. What kind of procedures? Have you asked her to leave? No, I hadn't thought it would be necessary. That's step 1, a clear, documented request with a reasonable timeline. My third phone call was to my bank. Mrs. Henderson, this is Betty Carson. I need to make some changes to my account access. That evening, Chelsea came downstairs for dinner wearing one of those athleisure outfits that cost more than my monthly phone bill. She'd done her hair and makeup like she was going somewhere special, not like someone who'd supposedly been working from home all day. Smells good, Grandma, she said, settling into what had become her chair at my kitchen table. I served the pot roast I'd been making since before she was born, the same recipe that had fed her father when he was her age and working construction to put himself through night school. Chelsea, I said, sitting down across from her, we need to talk. Something in my tone must have registered because she looked up from her phone for the first time in weeks. Is everything okay? That depends. I got your text this morning about quitting your job. She brightened immediately. Oh, good. I was hoping we could discuss that. See, I've been doing a lot of thinking about my life path, and I've realized that traditional employment just isn't aligned with my authentic self. I need time to explore my passions, maybe start a wellness blog, or get into life coaching. But that requires an investment period where I'll need support while I build my brand. I blinked at her. Your authentic self? Exactly. I can't be my best self when I'm trapped in corporate capitalism. I need freedom to discover who I'm meant to be. Oh, honey, you have no idea who you're about to discover I'm meant to be. And who exactly did you think would fund this journey of self-discovery? I asked, cutting a piece of pot roast with perhaps more force than necessary. Chelsea waved her fork airily. Well, I figured we could work something out. I mean, you're retired, you're not really using all your money, and I'm family. Plus, think of it as an investment in my future. The audacity was breathtaking. Really. My retirement money was a modest pension and Social Security that barely covered my own expenses before Chelsea had moved in and tripled my cost. But in her mind, I was apparently sitting on some vast fortune just waiting to subsidize her quarter-life crisis. Chelsea, sweetheart, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want to quit your job, the job that provides your health insurance and income, so you can start a wellness blog, and you expect me to pay for your living expenses while you figure out if blogging is profitable? When you put it like that, it sounds bad, she said, her lower lip jutting out in the same pout that had worked on her grandfather when she was sick. But I'm not asking you to support me forever, just until I get established. How long is until you get established? Chelsea shifted uncomfortably. I don't know. A year? Maybe 2? These things take time, Grandma. You can't rush authentic growth. A year. Maybe 2. I was supposed to fund a grown woman's extended adolescence for potentially 2 years while she discovered her authentic self on my dime. And what makes you think I can afford to support 2 people on my retirement income? Come on, Grandma. This house is paid off and it's not like you have expensive hobbies. Plus, Dad's always said you're really good with money. Right. Because being good with money when you're 73 means you have unlimited funds to waste on other people's fantasy careers. Not that you've spent decades being careful and frugal so you don't become a burden on your family in your old age. Chelsea, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I cannot and will not support you while you quit your job to start a blog. Her face went through several interesting expressions. Confusion first, as if she couldn't process the concept of hearing no, then hurt, the practiced wounded look she'd perfected as a teenager. Finally, anger, which was at least honest. Grandma, I can't believe you're being so selfish. I thought family was supposed to help each other. Family does help each other. I've helped you for 8 months. I've provided you with housing, food, utilities, and emotional support, while you've contributed nothing except higher bills and attitude. I've been working, have you? Because I had an interesting conversation with Dorothy at the employment office today. The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked exactly like her father when I'd caught him sneaking in past curfew 30 years ago. Guilty, panicked, and calculating how to talk her way out of trouble. What did she tell you? She told me that you filed for unemployment benefits 3 months ago, claiming you'd been laid off. But you were still working at the marketing firm, weren't you? Chelsea's confident expression crumbled. It's not what you think. Then explain it to me. I was having problems at work. My boss was micromanaging me, and the environment was toxic. I knew they were going to fire me eventually, so I filed for benefits early. It's not like I was stealing money. Chelsea, collecting unemployment benefits while you're employed is fraud. It doesn't matter if you think you might get fired someday. Lots of people do it. It's not a big deal. It's a felony, sweetheart, and it becomes a very big deal when the state finds out. For the first time since moving in, Chelsea looked genuinely frightened. You wouldn't report me. I don't have to. Dorothy said the employment office is already investigating discrepancies in your case. Chelsea stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if there was any angle left to work. Grandma, please, I made a mistake, but I can fix it. I'll pay back the money. With what money? You want to quit your job, remember? I'll keep the job and start paying you rent. How much rent? I don't know. Whatever's fair. I pulled out a piece of paper I'd been working on while she was upstairs. I calculated your fair share of household expenses since you moved in. Food, utilities, increased insurance costs, wear and tear on the house. It comes to about $200 per month. Chelsea's eyes widened. $200? That's most of my salary. Then you'll need to find a way to earn more money. This is insane. Other grandparents would be supportive. Other grandparents probably have grandchildren who don't commit fraud and expect their families to fund their lifestyle fantasies. Chelsea stood up so fast, her chair scraped against the floor. Fine. You know what? Maybe I don't want to stay here anymore anyway. This house is depressing, and she paused, probably remembering that she needed my continued cooperation. I'm what, Chelsea? Nothing. Forget it. But I could see it in her eyes. I was old, I was boring, I was an obstacle to the life she thought she deserved. In Chelsea's mind, I existed to serve her needs, and the moment I stopped being useful, I became the problem. You have 2 weeks, I said calmly. 2 weeks for what? 2 weeks to decide. Keep your job and we'll discuss a reasonable arrangement for you to continue living here temporarily with rent, or find somewhere else to live. But either way, the days of you treating my home like a free resort are over. Chelsea stared at me like I'd just spoken in ancient Greek. You're kicking me out. I'm giving you choices. What you do with them is up to you. That's when I saw something flicker across her face that told me I'd been right to make those phone calls earlier. Something cold and calculating that reminded me that pretty wounded Chelsea was also the same person who'd been defrauding government agencies and lying to me for months. 2 weeks was going to be very interesting indeed. The next morning, I woke up to find my kitchen ransacked, not violently, but methodically. Every cabinet had been opened, every drawer pulled out, and my important papers were scattered across the counter. My bank statements, insurance documents, even my old tax returns were spread out like Chelsea had been conducting some kind of financial audit. She was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, typing furiously while surrounded by the evidence of her midnight investigation. Good morning, I said pleasantly, stepping carefully around the mess. Looking for something? Chelsea didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. I was trying to understand your financial situation. If you're really struggling, maybe we can find a solution that works for both of us. My financial situation. I poured myself coffee from the pot she'd made, probably the first time she'd touched the coffee maker since moving in. How thoughtful of you to be concerned. I found some things that don't make sense, Grandma. Like this investment account statement that shows over $380,000, and this life insurance policy worth $150,000. Plus, the house is worth at least $320,000, according to Zillow. Oh, my little granddaughter had been busy. She'd found my investment account, the one I'd been building for 40 years to ensure I never became a burden on my children. She'd found the life insurance policy my husband had left me. She'd even researched the value of my house, the house I'd been living in and maintaining for 35 years. So you see, Chelsea continued, her voice taking on that persuasive tone she used when she wanted something, you're actually pretty well off. You could easily afford to help me get started with my business venture. Think of it as an early inheritance. An early inheritance. My 26-year-old granddaughter had spent the night calculating the value of of my assets and decided she was entitled to a portion of them while I was still breathing. Chelsea, sweetheart, did it occur to you that those assets are meant to cover my expenses for potentially 20 or 30 more years? Healthcare, long-term care, emergencies? But you're healthy. And besides, this house is way too big for one person. You could sell it, move into a nice senior community, and use the leftover money to invest in my future. She had it all figured out. Sell my house, the house where I'd raised my children and built my life so she wouldn't have to get a job she didn't love. Move into a nice senior community so she could have access to my money. Or, Chelsea continued, warming to her theme, you could take out a home equity loan. Property taxes are so reasonable, and the payments would be tiny compared to what this place is worth. I stared at my granddaughter, really looked at her, and realized I was seeing her clearly for the first time. The pretty face, the practiced tears, the wounded victim act, it was all packaging for someone fundamentally selfish, someone who'd spent the night going through my private financial documents so she could figure out how to get her hands on my life savings. Let me get this straight, I said, sitting down across from her. You want me to either sell my house or mortgage it so you can quit your job and start a blog. A wellness business. Grandma, it's not just a blog. Right, a wellness business run by someone who's been defrauding the unemployment office and lying to her grandmother for months. Chelsea's cheeks flushed. That's not fair. I've been going through a difficult time. And what exactly qualifies you to give wellness advice to other people? Your expertise in destroying your marriage? Your skills in financial manipulation? I've been doing a lot of personal growth work. I've read dozens of books about authentic living and manifestation, and I have a really strong social media presence. Personal growth work. She'd been living rent-free in my house for 8 months, and she considered that personal growth work. Chelsea, I'm curious about something. In all your research last night, did you happen to calculate how much money you've cost me since moving in? She shifted uncomfortably. I don't know what you mean. I opened my own laptop, which I'd password protected after catching her using it to research investment scams 3 months ago. Let me show you some numbers. Before you moved in, my monthly expenses were approximately $2,400. That covered everything. Utilities, food, insurance, maintenance, everything. Chelsea's eyes darted toward the door like she was calculating escape route. Since you moved in 8 months ago, my average monthly expenses have been $3,600. That's an additional $1,200 per month, or $9,600 total. Plus, there was that little incident with my credit card that you used for your shopping spree in Portland. I paid that back. You paid back $180 of the $650 you charged. The other $470 is still on my statement. I was going to pay you back when I got my next unemployment check. With money you're receiving fraudulently while employed. Chelsea's face cycled through her usual emotions. Confusion, hurt, anger, and finally, calculation. I could practically see her trying to figure out how to spin this in her favor. Grandma, I think you're being really unfair. Yes, maybe I made some mistakes, but that doesn't mean you should just abandon me. I'm family. I'm your only granddaughter, and you're 26 years old with a college degree and employment experience. You're perfectly capable of supporting yourself. But I don't want to just survive, Grandma. I want to thrive. I want to build something meaningful, then build it with your own money and your own work. Chelsea stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor for the second time in 2 days. Fine. You know what? I don't need your help anyway. I have other options. What other options? I've been talking to Derek. He thinks I have real potential as an influencer, and he has connections in the wellness industry. He might be able to help me get started. Derek, the personal trainer she'd cheated with. So my granddaughter's backup plan was to run to her married boyfriend and expect him to fund her lifestyle. Chelsea, Derek is married. Not for much longer. His marriage is basically over. He's just waiting for the right time to leave. Oh, honey, every married man who's cheating says his marriage is basically over. It's right there in the Cheating Husband Handbook, Chapter 1. And he's offered to support you financially while you build your influencer career. He believes in me, Grandma. Unlike some people, there it was. The manipulation attempt disguised as emotional blackmail. I was supposed to feel guilty for not believing in her dreams hard enough to fund them indefinitely. Chelsea, I'm glad you have other options. That makes what I'm about to say much easier. Something in my tone must have warned her because she sat back down, suddenly looking much younger and less certain. I've made some decisions about our living arrangement, I continued. Decisions that will take effect whether you choose to keep your job or not. What kind of decisions? Starting Monday, you'll be paying rent, $800 per month, plus half the utilities. If you want to continue living here, you'll contribute to the household expenses like any other adult. $800, that's almost my entire salary. Then you'll need to find a higher paying job or find somewhere cheaper to live. Chelsea stared at me with something approaching panic. For 8 months, she'd been living consequence-free, funded by her grandmother's retirement savings while she played house and explored her authentic self. The idea of actually paying for her lifestyle had apparently never occurred to her. "This is so unfair," she said finally. "You're putting me in an impossible position. I'm putting you in an adult position. Welcome to the real world, sweetheart." That's when Chelsea smiled, and it wasn't her usual pretty, charming smile. It was something colder, more calculated. "You know what, Grandma? I don't think you've thought this through." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been living here for 8 months. I receive mail here. This is my legal residence. You can't just start charging rent without proper notice." My blood chilled because she was right. Patricia had warned me about tenant rights, but I'd hoped it wouldn't come to that. "Are you threatening me, Chelsea?" "I'm just saying that maybe we should both think carefully about how we want to handle this situation. I'd hate for things to get complicated." And there it was. My sweet granddaughter, the one I'd taken in when she had nowhere else to go, was threatening to use tenant laws to prevent me from controlling my own home. But what Chelsea didn't know was that I'd already had that conversation with Patricia. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment since the day I'd found her going through my financial documents. What she really didn't know was that her grandmother had been dealing with manipulative people long before Chelsea was born. 2 weeks was starting to feel like too much time. Monday morning, I woke up to find a notice taped to my refrigerator. Not a note, a notice. Typed, printed, and formatted like something from a law office. "Notice of tenant rights," it read. "As a legal tenant of this property, I am entitled to 30 days written notice for any changes to rental terms or requests to vacate. Any attempt to force me to leave without proper notice may result in legal action." It was signed Chelsea Marie Thompson, tenant, and dated with Sunday's date. My granddaughter had spent her Sunday evening researching tenant law and typing up legal threats to post in my kitchen. I made my coffee and read the notice again. The sheer audacity was almost admirable. In less than 48 hours, Chelsea had gone from sweet, wounded granddaughter to amateur legal scholar threatening her own grandmother with lawsuit. What she'd apparently failed to research, however, was Oregon's specific laws about family members living in homes they don't own, or the fact that I'd recorded every conversation we'd had since Friday night. My phone rang at 7:30. Patricia, right on schedule. "Good morning, Betty. How are you holding up?" "Oh, I'm just fine. Chelsea left me a lovely legal notice this morning. Very professional looking." Patricia chuckled. "I see she's been doing some research. That's actually good for us." "How is her threatening to sue me good for us?" "Because it establishes that she understands she's living here as a tenant, not as family. Which brings us to the next phase of your plan." Ah, yes, the plan. The one I'd been developing since Margaret had opened my eyes to what was really happening in my own home. "Are you ready for this, Betty? Once we start, there's no going back." Patricia, my granddaughter, spent the night going through my financial documents so she could figure out how to get her hands on my life saving. Then she threatened me with legal action when I asked her to pay rent. I passed ready about 2 threats ago. All right then, phase 1 begins now. At 9 a.m., I knocked on Chelsea's door. She opened it wearing one of those expensive athleisure outfits and a facial mask that probably cost more than my monthly phone bill. "Good morning, Chelsea. I wanted to let you know that I received your notice." "Good. I'm glad we understand each other." "Oh, we definitely understand each other, which is why I wanted to give you this." I handed her an envelope containing her own notice. This one from Patricia's law office. "Notice to pay rent or quit," she read aloud. "Tenant is hereby notified that she is in default of her rental obligations for failure to pay rent. Tenant must pay all outstanding rent within 72 hours or vacate the premises." Chelsea looked up from the document with confusion morphing into anger. "What outstanding rent? You never charged me rent before." "Actually, Chelsea, if you read carefully, you'll see that under Oregon law, when someone establishes tenancy in a family member's home, they're obligated to contribute to household expenses. Since you've been living here for 8 months without contributing, you owe approximately $9,600 in back contributions." $9,000? That's insane. It's actually quite reasonable. That's $1,200 per month, which is well below market rate for a furnished room in this area. Chelsea's face went white. "I don't have $9,000. Then I guess you need to vacate within 72 hours. This is ridiculous. You can't just suddenly decide I owe you money." "I'm not deciding anything, sweetheart. I'm following proper legal procedures, exactly as you requested. You wanted to be treated as a legal tenant. Tenants pay rent." Chelsea crumpled the notice in her fist. "This is some kind of scam. You're trying to manipulate me into leaving. I'm following proper legal procedures, exactly as you requested. You wanted to be treated as a legal tenant. Tenants pay rent." Chelsea slammed her door hard enough to rattle the windows. Within minutes, I could hear her on the phone, her voice rising as she tried to find someone who would tell her she was being treated unfairly. An hour later, she emerged, looking defeated. "I called 2 lawyers," she said. "They both said you have the right to charge rent." "How surprising." "But Grandma, I really don't have $9,000. I've been living on my salary, and most of that went to personal expenses. expenses. Personal expenses, like the shopping trips, the expensive lunches, the skincare products that cost more than my groceries. Then you have 72 hours to vacate. Chelsea's eyes filled with tears. The real ones this time, I thought. Please, Grandma, I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your granddaughter. Family is supposed to help family. Family does help family, Chelsea. I helped you for 8 months, but families also respect each other, and they contribute to the household instead of treating it like a free hotel. What if I got serious about paying rent going forward? What if I promised to make this work? That would be a good start, but you'd still owe the back rent. Could we work out a payment plan? I pretended to consider this. What kind of payment plan did you have in mind? I could pay maybe $300 a month until it's paid off. $300 a month would take you 32 months to pay off $9,600. That's nearly 3 years, Chelsea. Well, what would be reasonable? Full payment within 30 days, or you find somewhere else to live. Chelsea stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating whether tears or anger would be more effective. You know what, Grandma? Fine, I'll leave. But don't expect me to come running back when you're old and sick and need someone to take care of you. The threat was supposed to devastate me, I think. The idea that I'd be old and alone, abandoned by the granddaughter I'd refused to enable. Instead, I felt something like relief. Chelsea, sweetheart, I'm already old, and if this week has taught me anything, it's that I'd rather be alone than be manipulated. You'll regret this. When Derek and I get our life together and become successful, you'll regret not believing in me. Derek, whose wife had just discovered the affair. Derek, who couldn't help her because his marriage was imploding. Derek, who was apparently going to leave his family and build an empire with my unemployed granddaughter. I'm sure I'll find a way to cope with the regret. Chelsea turned and stomped back upstairs, no doubt to call Derek and explain that her mean grandmother was forcing her to find somewhere else to live. That evening, Margaret came over for tea and moral support. How are you holding up, hon? Better than I expected. It's amazing how much lighter you feel once you stop carrying someone else's problems. Any word from the boyfriend? Chelsea's been on the phone all afternoon. I think she's discovering that Derek's availability is more limited now that his wife knows about them. Margaret sipped her tea thoughtfully. What do you think she'll do? I think she'll try one more manipulation attempt. When that doesn't work, she'll probably leave in a dramatic fashion and try to make me feel guilty about it. And if she does? I smiled at my friend. Margaret, I spent 40 years dealing with difficult people in customer service. Chelsea is good, but she's not that good. But I was wrong about one thing. Chelsea wasn't planning to leave dramatically. She was planning something much more calculated. Wednesday morning, I woke up to my doorbell ringing at 6:15 a.m. Through the window, I saw a police car in my driveway and 2 uniformed officers on my porch. My stomach dropped because whatever Chelsea had planned, it involved law enforcement. Mrs. Carson, I'm Officer Martinez. This is Officer Thompson. We received a call about a welfare check. A welfare check? Your granddaughter called us last night. She's concerned about your mental state and your ability to care for yourself safely. I stared at them for a moment, processing the sheer audacity of what Chelsea had done. She'd called the police and reported me as mentally incompetent. Officers, would you like to come in? I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Officer Martinez looked relieved. I suppose when you're doing welfare checks on elderly people, it's always a good sign when they answer the door coherently dressed and invite you in for coffee. Ma'am, your granddaughter was quite upset when she called. She said you'd been acting erratically, making unreasonable demands, and she was worried you might be experiencing some kind of cognitive decline. What kind of unreasonable demands? She said you suddenly started charging her rent after letting her live here for free, and that you'd threatened to evict her for no reason. Officer Thompson was looking around my kitchen, which was clean and organized. The breakfast dishes were washed and put away. The coffee was fresh. Everything was exactly as it should be in the home of someone with full mental capacity. Officers, would you like to see the documentation from this situation? I showed them Chelsea's legal notice about tenant rights. I showed them my notice about back rent. I showed them my bank statements documenting the increased expenses since Chelsea had moved in. Your granddaughter didn't mention that she'd been living here for 8 months without paying rent, Officer Martinez observed. She also didn't mention that she's been collecting unemployment benefits while working, I added. The officers exchanged glances. Ma'am, that sounds like benefits fraud. I believe it is. I have documentation of that as well, if you need to see it. Officer Thompson cleared his throat. Mrs. Carson, your granddaughter also mentioned that you'd been going through her personal belongings and making threats. That's interesting, since the only person who's been going through personal belongings is Chelsea. She searched my financial documents without permission and used that information to pressure me into funding her lifestyle. I showed them the photos I'd taken of my papers scattered across the kitchen counter Monday morning. Did you give her permission to access these documents? Absolutely not. I woke up to find my kitchen ransacked and my private financial information spread across the table. Officer Martinez was taking notes now. Mrs. Carson, based on what we're seeing here, it appears your granddaughter may have misrepresented the situation kitchen when she called us. I think my granddaughter is a scared young woman who's about to face some adult consequences for the first time in her life. But I don't think that constitutes a mental health emergency on my part. No, ma'am, it doesn't. We'll document this as an unfounded welfare check. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. After the officers left, I sat in my kitchen and tried to process what had just happened. Chelsea had called the police and tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. She'd lied to law enforcement and wasted their time because she was angry about being asked to pay rent. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was scorched earth. At 10 a.m., Chelsea came downstairs dressed like she was going to court. Hair done, makeup perfect, wearing her most conservative outfit. "Good morning, Grandma. I heard you had some visitors this morning." I did indeed. Very enlightening conversation. "I hope you understand that I was only concerned about your welfare. When elderly people start behaving erratically, sometimes family has to intervene." Elderly people behaving erratic. She was 26 years old and talking to me like I was a confused child. "Chelsea, the officers seem to think you'd misrepresented the situation." "What do you mean?" "I mean, they were surprised to learn that the erratic behavior you were concerned about involved me asking you to pay rent after 8 months of free housing." Chelsea's confident expression faltered slightly. "Well, I may not have explained the full context. The full context being that you've been defrauding the unemployment office, going through my private financial documents, and threatening me with lawsuits when I asked you to contribute to household expenses. That's not... You're twisting everything." "Am I?" Because Officer Martinez seemed to think that filing false benefits claims while living rent-free with family might be something the state would be interested in investigating. Chelsea went very still. "You didn't tell them about that." "I showed them documentation. They drew their own conclusions." "Grandma, you can't report me for that. I'm family." "Chelsea, you just tried to have me declared mentally incompetent because I asked you to pay rent." Family works both ways. For the first time since this whole situation started, Chelsea looked genuinely frightened. Not manipulative tears or wounded victim act. Real fear. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to pack your things and leave my house. Today." "I can't leave today. I don't have anywhere to go." "Then you should have thought about that before you called the police and tried to have me committed." Chelsea stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if there was any angle left to work. "What if I apologize? What if I promise to get serious about paying rent and contributing?" "Chelsea, you crossed a line this morning. You lied to law enforcement and tried to use my age against me. There's no coming back from that." "Please, Grandma, I'll do anything." "You'll do anything except get a job and support yourself like an adult. That's not fair." "Life isn't fair, sweetheart. Sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do. Sometimes we have to work jobs we don't love. Sometimes we have to live in places that aren't as nice as we'd prefer. That's called being an adult." "I hate you," she said quietly. "I know, but I love you enough to stop enabling your bad choice." "This isn't love. This is abandonment." "No, Chelsea. Abandonment would have been letting you continue down this path until you're 40 and still expecting other people to pay your way." Chelsea went upstairs to pack, and I called Patricia to let her know about the morning's developments. "She called the police?" "That's actually filing a false report under Oregon law." "I don't want to press charges, Patricia. I just want her out of my house." "That's your choice, but you should document everything in case she escalates further." "Do you think she will?" "Betty, your granddaughter has shown a pattern of increasingly desperate behavior. First manipulation, then legal threats, then false police reports. People like that usually don't stop until they face real consequences." That afternoon, Chelsea loaded her car with her belongings. It took several trips, which told me exactly how much stuff she'd accumulated during her 8 months of temporary housing. As she was putting the last suitcase in her trunk, she turned to me with one final attempt. "Grandma, I know you think I'm terrible, but I really was trying to build something meaningful with my life." "Chelsea, you were trying to build it with my money while lying to me about your circumstances. That's not building something meaningful. That's being a con artist. I would have paid you back eventually." "With what money? You wanted to quit your job, remember?" She didn't have an answer for that. "Where will you go?" I asked, because despite everything, she was still my granddaughter. "Derek said I could stay with him until we figure things out." Derek, whose wife had just found out about the affair. Derek, who couldn't leave his family. Derek, who'd probably told Chelsea she could stay with him to get her out of his hair temporarily. "Chelsea, Derek is married with children. Do you really think that's a stable situation? His wife is moving out. They're getting separated." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I hope that works out for you." Chelsea got in her car and rolled down the window. "Grandma, when this all falls apart for you, when you're sitting in this house all alone, remember that you chose this." "I will, sweetheart. I absolutely will." I watched her drive away, and then I went inside to change my locks. But Chelsea's final manipulation wasn't driving away in a huff. It was the phone call I received 2 hours later from my son. "Mom, what the hell is going on with Chelsea?" My son Danny's voice was tight with anger and disbelief. "She just showed up at our house crying, saying you threw her out and called her a criminal." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Of course Chelsea had driven straight to her father. Of course she'd presented herself as the victim of her cruel, unreasonable grandmother. Danny, it's a complicated situation. She says you suddenly started charging her rent and threatened to evict her when she couldn't pay. Mom, she's been going through a hard time since her divorce. Her divorce was because she was cheating on Marcus with a married personal trainer. Silence on the other end. What? Chelsea wasn't the victim of a failed marriage, Danny. She was caught having an affair and Marcus threw her out. She came to me because she had nowhere else to go, not because I was her first choice. She never told us that. I'm sure she didn't. Just like she probably didn't tell you that she's been collecting unemployment benefits while working full-time. More silence. I could almost hear my son processing this information and realizing how much his daughter had lied to all of us. Mom, even if that's true, she's still family. We don't just throw family out on the street. Danny, I didn't throw her out on the street. I asked her to contribute to household expenses after 8 months of free housing. When she refused and threatened me with legal action, I gave her proper notice. She threatened you? She researched tenant law and left me legal notices claiming I couldn't change the terms of her living arrangement. She also went through my private financial documents without permission and used that information to pressure me into funding her lifestyle indefinitely. Jesus, Mom! I had no idea. There's more. This morning she called the police and reported me as mentally incompetent because I asked her to pay rent. She what? She told the officers I was behaving erratically and couldn't care for myself. She tried to use my age against me to avoid being held accountable for her choices. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Danny, are you still there? I'm here. I'm just processing. Chelsea is upstairs right now telling Linda that you've lost your mind and you're being cruel to her for no reason. What do you think? I think my daughter has been lying to everyone, and I think I owe you an apology. Relief flooded through me. I'd been terrified that Chelsea's manipulation would work on her parents the same way it had worked on me for 8 months. You don't owe me an apology, Danny. You believed your daughter. That's what good parents do. Good parents also teach their children to be responsible adults. Apparently, Linda and I failed at that. Chelsea is 26 years old. She's responsible for her own choices now. Mom, can I ask you something? How long has this been going on? I told him everything. The increased expenses, the unemployment fraud, the credit card charges, the financial research, the legal threats. All of it. $9,600? Danny's voice was incredulous. She cost you $9,600 in 8 months? Actually, it was closer to $10,000 when you include the credit card charges she never paid back. And she wanted you to continue supporting her indefinitely? She wanted me to sell my house or take out a home equity loan so she could quit her job and start a wellness blog. A wellness blog? Danny's voice was flat. My daughter, who's never held a job for more than 2 years and just destroyed her marriage through infidelity, wants to give other people wellness advice. That appears to be the plan. Mom, I am so sorry. Linda and I had no idea how bad things had gotten. Danny, you couldn't have known. Chelsea was very careful to present different versions of the truth to different people. What do you need me to do? Right now? Nothing. I just need you to know that my decision wasn't made lightly or out of cruelty. And Chelsea? What should we do about Chelsea? I thought about this carefully. Danny and Linda were good people who were dealing with their own financial pressures. They didn't need their adult daughter moving back home and creating more problems. That's between you and Linda and Chelsea. But Danny, whatever you decide, make sure you're making the decision based on what's best for everyone involved, not just what Chelsea wants. She can't stay here long term, Mom. We're already struggling, and with my reduced hours since the heart issues, we can't take on additional expenses. Then you'll need to help her understand that. What if she refuses to leave? Then you'll face the same situation I just faced. The choice between enabling her or holding her accountable. After hanging up with Danny, I sat in my quiet kitchen and thought about family loyalty. For 8 months, I'd confused enabling with love. I'd thought that being a good grandmother meant sacrificing my own well-being for Chelsea's comfort. But real love, the kind that actually helps people, sometimes means saying no. Sometimes it means watching someone you love face consequences for their choices. Sometimes it means choosing your own well-being over someone else's demands. My phone rang again. This time it was Linda, Danny's wife. Betty, I owe you an enormous apology. Linda, you don't? Yes, I do. Chelsea has been here for 4 hours, and she's already caused more drama than we've had in our house all year. She's demanding we let her stay indefinitely. She's asking to borrow money, and when I told her she'd need to find a job, she had a complete meltdown. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. Don't apologize. You tried to warn us, but we didn't listen. We believed Chelsea's version of events without questioning it. What's Danny's reaction? Danny is furious. Not at you. At Chelsea. He just told her that she has 1 week to find other arrangements. How did she take that? About as well as you'd expect. Tears, accusations, threats to cut us out of her life forever if we don't support her dreams. I'm sorry, Linda. Betty, can I ask you something? In all the time Chelsea was living with you, did she ever ask about your health, your finances, your needs? I thought about this. 8 months of daily interaction, and Chelsea had never once asked how I was feeling, whether I needed help with anything, or if her presence was creating any burden. No, she never asked. That tells you everything you need to know about her priorities. That evening, Margaret came over to check on me. How are you holding up, hon? Better than I expected. It feels strange having my house back to myself, but it's a good strange. Any regrets? None. For the first time in 8 months, I can walk through my own house without wondering what Chelsea has gotten into or what new crisis she's created. What do you think will happen to her? I looked out at my garden, where the flowers I'd planted last spring were blooming despite my neglect during the Chelsea months. I think she'll figure it out. Maybe not today, maybe not next month, but eventually she'll realize that she can't manipulate her way through life forever. And if she doesn't, then that's her choice. I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, but I was wrong about Chelsea figuring it out quickly. 3 days later, she was back with a plan that would test everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. Saturday morning, I was enjoying my first peaceful breakfast in 8 months when Chelsea's car pulled into my driveway. But she wasn't alone. Derek was with her, and they were both getting out of the car with the kind of determined expressions that meant trouble. I watched through my kitchen window as they approached my front door. Derek was older than I'd expected, maybe 35, with that particular brand of male confidence that comes from having women compete for your attention. Chelsea was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something expensive looking that made her look more sophisticated than her usual athleisure uniform. The doorbell rang, and I took my time answering it. Hello, Chelsea. Derek. Grandma, we need to talk. Chelsea's voice was different, more assured, less desperate. This is Derek Morrison, my business partner. Business partner. How quickly the married personal trainer had been rebranded. Mr. Morrison. I nodded politely but didn't invite them in. Mrs. Carson, it's a pleasure to meet you. Chelsea has told me so much about you. I'll bet she has. What can I do for you both? We'd like to present you with a business proposition, Derek said, flashing the kind of smile that had probably worked on countless women. An opportunity that could benefit all of us. I'm listening. May we come in? Chelsea asked. This is going to take a few minutes to explain properly. Against my better judgment, I let them into my living room. Derek looked around with the calculating eye of someone appraising property values, while Chelsea settled onto my sofa like she still lived here. Grandma, Derek and I have been working on something amazing. A wellness retreat center that combines fitness, nutrition, and spiritual healing. We found the perfect opportunity, and we have investors interested. How nice for you. Derek leaned forward earnestly. Mrs. Carson, what we need is a small bridge loan to secure our startup costs while our main financing comes through. Just temporary funding to show good faith to our investors. And how much is this bridge loan? $50,000, Chelsea said quickly. But it's completely secured, and you'd earn 8% interest annually. $50,000. They wanted me to loan them $50,000 for a wellness retreat run by a woman who'd been unemployed for weeks and a man who'd been cheating on his wife. That's an interesting proposal. Tell me about this business plan. Derek pulled out his phone and showed me what looked like generic wellness retreat photos downloaded from the internet. Beautiful mountain views, people doing yoga, rustic cabin. We're planning to rent retreat space initially, Derek explained. Keep overhead low while we build our client base. And your target market? Professional women who need to reconnect with their authentic selves, Chelsea said eagerly. Derek has connections throughout the fitness industry, and I'll handle the marketing and social media. What's your background in retreat management? Derek's confidence flickered slightly. Well, I've been in the fitness industry for 8 years. I understand what people need for wellness. And your experience in business management? Hospitality? Event planning? Chelsea would handle the administrative side. She has a marketing background. Chelsea has 8 months of entry-level marketing experience. Grandma! Chelsea's voice was sharp. You're being unfair. I'm being realistic. You're asking me to invest my retirement savings in a business run by someone with no relevant experience and someone who... I paused, looking at Derek. What's your current employment status? Derek shifted uncomfortably. I'm transitioning between opportunities. He means he got fired, Chelsea said quickly. But that's because his boss was threatened by Derek's vision. I see. And your personal situation, Derek? Are you married? It's complicated, he said, his charming smile becoming strained. Most things are. Chelsea, can I speak with you privately for a moment? Chelsea followed me into the kitchen, leaving Derek to examine my living room. Sweetheart, do you know anything about Derek's financial history? What do you mean? I mean, Have you done any research on your business partner's background? He's very successful in the fitness industry. Chelsea, did you know he filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago? Her face went white. That's not true. Public records are available online. Derek Morrison, personal trainer, filed bankruptcy in 2022. He also has 3 liens against him for unpaid business debt. You're lying. I'm being thorough. Something you might want to consider before asking me to invest in his business venture. We returned to the living room, where Derek was studying the family photos on my mantle with uncomfortable intensity. Derek, I said pleasantly, Chelsea tells me you're very successful in the fitness industry. That's right. I've built several successful client relationships. And your long-term plans? Do you see yourself staying in this area? Absolutely. This is where I want to build my future. With Chelsea? Derek and Chelsea exchanged glances. We're partners in every sense, he said carefully. How nice. And your wife? Is she supportive of your career change? Derek's composure cracked completely. My personal life doesn't affect my business capabilities. Actually, it does when you're asking people to invest in your judgment. Chelsea, did Derek mention that he's still married and living with his wife and children? That's temporary, Chelsea said desperately. They're working out the separation detail. Are they? Because I called the courthouse yesterday. No divorce papers have been filed. The silence in the room was deafening. Derek looked like he wanted to disappear, and Chelsea looked like she was about to cry. Mrs. Carson, Derek said finally, I think there's been some misunderstanding. I don't think so. I think you're a married man having an affair with my granddaughter, and you're both trying to scam me out of my retirement savings. It's not a scam, Chelsea protested. This is a legitimate business opportunity. Based on what? Photos downloaded from the internet? A business plan you haven't shown me? The expertise of a bankrupt personal trainer who can't even handle his own marriage honestly? Derek stood up abruptly. I think we should go. I think that's an excellent idea. As they reached the door, Chelsea turned back with one final attempt. Grandma, I know you're angry, but this could really work. We just need someone to believe in us. Chelsea, I've believed in you for 26 years, but believing in someone doesn't mean funding their fantasies with money they haven't earned. You're going to regret this, Derek said quietly. I'm going to regret letting you into my house, but I'll get over it. After they left, I sat in my living room and tried to process what had just happened. Chelsea and her married boyfriend had attempted to manipulate me into funding their fantasy business based on internet photos and empty promises. But what bothered me most wasn't the attempted scam. It was the realization that my granddaughter was so desperate to avoid working that she'd partner with anyone who promised to support her lifestyle. I picked up my phone and called the state unemployment office. Hello, I'd like to report suspected benefits fraud. 2 weeks later, I was having my morning coffee when Detective Sarah Williams called with an update. Mrs. Carson, I wanted to let you know that we've completed our investigation into your granddaughter's unemployment claims. What did you find? She collected $4,200 in benefits while employed. That's a Class C felony under Oregon law. The state attorney's office is moving forward with prosecution. My stomach clenched. Even after everything Chelsea had put me through, hearing that she'd be facing criminal charges was difficult. What kind of penalties are we talking about? For a first offense, probably supervised probation, community service, and full restitution to the state. If she cooperates and shows remorse, she might avoid jail time. And if she doesn't cooperate, then she could be looking at up to a year in county jail. After hanging up, I sat in my quiet kitchen and thought about choices and consequences. In a few days, Chelsea would likely be arrested for crimes she'd committed while living in my house. My family would probably blame me for ruining a young woman's future. But maybe, just maybe, facing real consequences would finally teach Chelsea something that 26 years of enabling hadn't. The arrest happened on a Tuesday. Danny called me that afternoon, his voice shaken. Mom, they arrested Chelsea this morning, at work, in front of everyone. I'm sorry you had to hear about it that way. Did you know this was going to happen? I reported the unemployment fraud to the state. What they did with that information was their decision. She could go to jail. She could. Or she could accept responsibility, make restitution, and learn from this experience. How can you be so calm about this? Because I've been watching my granddaughter make increasingly bad choices for 8 months, and nothing I said or did convinced her to change course. Maybe facing real consequences will. Linda thinks we should hire a lawyer. That's your decision to make. Danny, what would you do? I thought about this carefully. I'd let her face the consequences of her choices with a public defender. I'd make it clear that this was the result of her decisions, not something that happened to her. And I'd tell her that our support depends on her taking full responsibility for her action. That seems harsh. Danny, what's harsh is watching someone you love destroy their life because they've never faced consequences. What's harsh is enabling someone until they're 40 and still expecting other people to fix their problems. 3 days later, Chelsea called me from jail. Grandma, it's me. Her voice was small and scared. Nothing like the confident young woman who demanded money for her fake business venture. Hello, Chelsea. I need help. They're talking about keeping me here until trial. The public defender says I could get probation if I plead guilty and pay back the money. That sounds like good advice. advice, but I'd have a criminal record. It would ruin my future. Chelsea, what did you think would happen when you committed fraud? I don't know. I thought it would work out somehow. There it was again. The root of Chelsea's problems. I thought it would work out somehow. She'd gone through life expecting other people to make things work out for her. How much is the restitution? $4,200 plus court costs, maybe $5,000 total. Do you have $5,000? No, I was hoping. Dad said maybe you could help with the restitution and then I could pay you back. Chelsea, I helped you for 8 months. I gave you free housing, free food, free utilities. You repaid me by lying, stealing, and trying to manipulate me into funding your lifestyle. Why would I give you more money? Because I'm your granddaughter. You're also a 26-year-old adult who made deliberate choices to break the law. I know I messed up, but I can change. I can be better. Prove it. How can I prove it if I'm stuck in jail? By taking responsibility for your actions instead of asking other people to rescue you from them. The line went quiet for so long, I thought she'd hung up. So you're just going to let me have a criminal record? I'm going to let you experience the natural consequences of your choices. I hate you, she said finally. I know, but someday, when you're a responsible adult who handles her own problems, you might understand that this was the most loving thing I could do. 6 weeks later, Chelsea pleaded guilty to unemployment fraud. She was sentenced to 2 years supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution to the state. The family fracture was everything I'd feared. Danny and Linda blamed me for their daughter's criminal record. They stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped including me in family events. But 9 months into Chelsea's probation, I received a letter that made everything worthwhile. Dear Grandma, it began, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I understand why. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, and I finally understand some things I was too selfish to see before. The letter went on for 2 pages. Chelsea wrote about the community service she was doing at a literacy center, teaching adults to read. She wrote about the parenting classes she was taking as part of her probation requirement. She wrote about the part-time job she'd found at a non-profit organization. I realized that I'd never faced real consequences for anything in my life, she wrote. Whenever I messed up, someone always fixed it for me or helped me avoid dealing with the result. I thought that was love, but I understand now that it was actually preventing me from growing up. She wrote about Derek, who had moved out of state after his wife filed for divorce and took the children. I thought he was going to save me and make all my dreams come true, Chelsea wrote. But he was just another person running from his responsibilities, like I was. We were perfect for each other in all the worst ways. The letter ended with something I'd never heard from Chelsea before, a genuine apology. I'm sorry for lying to you, stealing from you, and treating you like a bank instead of like a person who deserved respect. I'm sorry for threatening you and trying to manipulate you. Most of all, I'm sorry for taking advantage of your love and kindness for so long. She included a photo of herself at the literacy center, helping an elderly man sound out words in a children's book. She looked tired, but genuinely happy. I don't expect you to forgive me, she wrote, but I wanted you to know that everything you tried to teach me about responsibility and consequences finally sank in. It just took a criminal record for me to stop running from the truth. Today, 18 months after Chelsea's sentencing, she lives in a small apartment across town and works full-time coordinating volunteer programs for the literacy center. She pays her own rent, buys her own food, and handles her own problems. We have lunch once a month, carefully rebuilding a relationship based on mutual respect instead of manipulation. She's never asked me for money, never hinted that she needs help, never suggested that I owe her anything because we're family. Danny and Linda eventually came around too, though it took time. They realized that enabling Chelsea hadn't helped her, and that sometimes the most loving thing a family can do is refuse to participate in someone's self-destruction. Last week, Chelsea brought me a small potted plant for my birthday. I wanted to get you something that would grow, she said. Something that would remind you that good things can come from difficult decisions. As I sit in my kitchen now, watching that plant thrive in the morning sunlight, I think about the difference between love and enabling. Real love sometimes means saying no. It means watching someone you care about face consequences you can't fix for them. It means understanding that carrying someone else's problems doesn't help them learn to walk on their own. My granddaughter learned to be independent the hard way, but she learned. And our relationship is stronger now because it's built on honesty instead of manipulation. Sometimes the kindest thing a grandmother can do is refuse to carry someone who's perfectly capable of carrying themselves. And that's exactly what I did. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.